Hi, good morning. Okay, today's topic is the criteria of a good language tests. So there are 4 criteria of a good language test which I can display from my simple paper here. Yeah, so the first one is reliable. A good test should be reliable. What does it mean by reliable? Reliable means that the results of the tests are relatively similar to each other across different times. So the scores should be the same from one time to another. That's the idea of being reliable. So for example, if somebody took a test on 1st of April in 2019 and he scored 550, when he later takes the same test on the 16th of March 2020, his score should also be around 550. In other words, the score should be similar to the previous score. And so he scores 552, which is not much different from 550. So the result is similar. In other words, we can say that the test is reliable because then we can trust the test. We can rely on the test. That's the idea of being reliable. If the test turns out different scores, wildly different scores from one time to another, then we have reason to doubt the test. We cannot rely on the test. So for example, if the same student scores 400 in the second administration in 16 March 2020, then we have reason to suspect that it is not reliable because the score is so much different from the previous one. Yeah. Or say he scores 890, which is suddenly high, only within several months. And that's also suspicious. Yeah. We can suspect that the test is not reliable because the scores vary widely from one time to another. Okay, that's reliable. Next one is valid. Yeah, valid. Valid means that the test measures what it is intended or what it is designed to measure. So for example, if we have a test like this, yeah, you can see that. The meaning of fix is, and then the test takers have to fill in with the right meaning. Now the test is designed to test vocabulary knowledge or vocabulary mastery. So if you interpret the result as a test of grammar or a proficiency of grammar, then your interpretation is not valid because the test is actually intended to be a vocabulary test. In the same way, if you want to test grammar, and if you write an item like this, and you claim that this is a grammar test, then your test is not valid either. Why? Because your so-called grammar test does not measure grammar. Yeah? You intend to test grammar, but it turns out that your test is a test of vocabulary. So it's not a test of grammar, and therefore it's not valid. Okay. Once again, validity means the extent to which the test measures whatever it is intended or whatever it is designed to measure. That's validity. Next one is practicality. What is practicality? Practicality simply means that the test is easy and economical to be designed, administered, and scored. So for example, if you spend 5 hours to make a multiple choice test, then in terms of making, this is not quite practical because you have to spend a lot of time, a lot of hours making the multiple choice test. But then you administer the multiple choice test, and it takes only 40 minutes for the students to finish. Then it is practical because the test does not take long hours to complete. Okay, that's practical. And then when it comes to scoring the multiple choice test, because you have scanners, it's very easy to complete the scoring within 20 minutes. And again, it is a very practical. Yeah, so that's practical. But in terms of the making, it's not practical because you have to spend a lot of hours creating the multiple choice test. Yeah, so a test can be can vary in terms of practicality. The making might be not very practical, but the scoring might be very practical. Say, for example, in writing test, the writing test in terms of the making is very practical. You just write down the instructions, that's it. But in terms of scoring, you have to spend a lot of hours reading your students' writing, reading your students' essay. And you might spend around 2 or 3 hours or even more if you have more students, right? So it's not practical. Yeah. Okay, so that's the third one. The fourth one is authentic. Yeah, authentic means the test puts the learners in a situation that simulates or as similar as possible to the real situation that your students will face in their studies or in their workplace. Say if you are teaching a group of secretaries, the test that you give them should be as similar as possible to the tasks of the secretaries outside the class. The task should be as similar as possible to whatever they will have to do in their real life as secretaries. That's the idea of being authentic, authenticity. Yeah. So for example, if you are constructing a test for a receptionist, then logically, a test which is good for them is speaking test. Why? Because in a speaking test, they will have to do the task which is similar to whatever they do out there in their real profession, in their real work, in their workplace. Because they, most of the time, they will speak in their real work. Then in the test, they should also be assigned to speak. Yeah, so that's authenticity. The extent to which the test simulates as closely as possible the real life situation that the test takers will have to face or will have to do in their real life. Okay. Suppose you give them a test of reading for the receptionist. You give them a test of reading, then it is not authentic. Why? Because most of the time a receptionist will not read. Yeah, a receptionist will most of the time will speak to people, will say things to people. Well, only very little time they read, but most of the time they will have to speak to somebody else because that's their real job. They'll have to call up somebody, they'll have to talk in the phone with somebody else. And so that's speaking all the time. So the task that they will have to do in your test should be as similar as possible to their real life situation, to their real life work in their workplace. That's the idea of authenticity. Okay, that's it. So you have 4 criteria of a good language test. First is reliable, right? The extent to which the test scores are similar from one time to another. Second is valid. Valid means the test measures whatever it is intended or designed to measure. Third is practical. Practical means it is easy to make, it is easy to administer, and it is easier to score. And also preferably not expensive as well. Yeah. Authentic. Authentic means a test simulates as closely as possible the real life situation or the real life job or the real life task that your learners will have to do outside the classroom. in their real world. Okay. Now, one might ask a question. So of the 4 criteria, which one is the most important? The most important is validity. So whenever you make a test, make sure that you have spent enough efforts, make sure that you have made enough efforts to establish the validity of the test, because that is the most important criterion in a good language test. Okay? Okay, so that's my lecture for today. I hope that you can understand the materials. See you again in the next episode. Goodbye for now.